Let's get one thing straight before we even start this episode today. There is only one enemy of prayer. Yes, the devil hates it when we pray, and he puts a lot of effort into stopping us. And he succeeds more often than he should. How does he do it? Well, that's the topic of today's episode.
You're listening to the Higher Attitudes Podcast, inspiration to lift your soul.
The scriptures teach us that the evil spirit teacheth not a man to pray, but teacheth him that he must not pray. This is Tom, and I'd like to discuss ways that the devil works to get us to give up on prayer. For me, it usually is about guilt, about my inadequacies. You see, I used to fall asleep on my knees quite often at night when I said my prayers. Or I would let my mind wander as I tried to pray. Or my mind would wander as I listened to my wife pray. Or I would feel like I was repeating many of the same requests again and again without really feeling them. It was easy to feel like I was letting God down. Except I wasn't. It's just that the devil didn't want me to know that. Eventually, God was able to get through to me, to help me understand how he feels about my prayers. And it took a while. It took courage to ask him for forgiveness for all of my shoddy prayers. And it took more courage to believe the feelings that came to me, the ones that told me that God loved my imperfect prayers, that he loved me for falling asleep on my knees, trying to pray, that he understood the human weakness of a wandering mind. Again and again, as I learned to pray in new ways, as I learned to reach out without fear of disappointing God with my feeble prayers, God helped me feel positive about my efforts. He inspired me to understand what prayer can become, and it has changed my life. I yearn for prayer now. I resist the almost natural urge to judge myself when I feel like I should pray because I know I should, because I've been commanded to. It is easy to misunderstand what I want to convey in that last statement. You see, I'm not saying that it is bad to obey God's commandment to pray. It is just that praying for the sake of obedience isn't enough for me anymore. When I feel myself praying to avoid angering God, I now remember how I have felt so many times in the past, that God is glad when I pray. If I take a moment to remember these past prayer experiences, I can let go of the idea of praying to avoid disobedience. And then my prayers change, and I begin really speaking to God. I am able to remember that he is listening to my words, and more importantly, that he understands my feelings, especially the ones that I have not expressed in words. Many times his Spirit opens to me what I am really feeling and helps me express my feelings in words so that my mind can grasp what my emotions are trying to tell me. God already understands what I'm feeling, but sometimes I don't. He is merciful in that way, and for that I am grateful. I believe the devil, who is a slanderer of the worst sort, wants me to believe that my efforts to pray are inadequate. He wants me to give up and remain silent. He wants me to run from my feelings, ignoring them, or worse, numbing them in a variety of ways. He doesn't want me to counsel with my Maker and learn from the influence of his Spirit. And because I know this now, I can also recognize the attempts to quiet my spiritual yearnings and expressions. And when I recognize them, I can ignore them. I can shoulder past them to that place where prayer becomes sweet. William W. Walford, an English pastor who lived in the late 18th century and early 19th century, wrote the hymn, "Sweet Hour of Prayer." I do not know if he was referring to the hour that he chose to say his prayers, as in, it's 6 a.m. and it's time for me to pray, or if he literally meant the hour that he spent in prayer was sweet. Our modern world makes the idea of spending an hour praying seem extreme, But I've learned that spending an hour praying is not extreme, but instead, as William Walford wrote, sweet. As I have let go of my preconceived ideas of what prayer needs to be and how I should pray to somehow please teachers, ministers, associates who are actually, by the way, not present when I speak to God, as I have let go and listened for God's whispered guidance on prayer, prayer has indeed become sweet, and praying for an hour no longer seems extreme. But prayers of an hour are not better or more received by God merely because of length. Hardly. It is what our hearts say that matter, and sometimes it takes me a while to let my heart catch up with my head, and other times it comes more quickly. But either way, I am sure the devil doesn't like it when this happens, when I am able to connect with God, when I begin to understand what I am feeling and what actions my heart wants me to take. I begin naturally following God's commandments without them being onerous, as I sometimes let them be. And when I walk in the light of God's commandments, I find peace for my soul and energy to act as a servant to others. Surely the devil can't be happy about that. Please, let your heart have its way. Let yourself relax and breathe deeply and approach God with a new heart, one that yearns not to follow the rules of prayer, but instead to approach God with a heart that very badly wants to connect with Him and feel His presence. You are allowed to pray for as long as you need. And if your mind wanders, don't be disappointed. Instead, smile and remember that God is happy that another wanderer is looking for Him. Start again and again and again, and as many times as you must. Remember that when you doubt your ability to connect with God, that it is very likely the devil, using whatever subtle influence that he wields, trying to dissuade you from reaching out to heaven. Ignore the enemy of prayer. There is little he can do to stop you if you let your desire to reach out to God run free.
Thank you for listening. We'd love to have you join us on Facebook at facebook.com/higherattitudes. Do you have an uplifting thought to share? Why not join our Facebook discussion group? Visit the group at facebook.com/groups/higherattitudes to request membership. If you'd like to leave a question about a challenge you're facing, or if you'd like to share a thought about how you've overcome negativity, call 719-301-0303 and record your question or comment. Please note that carrier rates may apply. Again, call 719-301-0303 to leave a question or comment. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and we look forward to you joining us for the next episode of the Higher Attitudes podcast. Please remember that the advice offered in this show is intended for informational purposes only. Please read our full disclaimer in the show notes.